Following the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, the defeated Pompeian forces dispersed in different directions. Some accepted Caesar's pardons, including Cicero, while others sought refuge in North Africa. Pompey the Great journeyed to Egypt with the hope of gaining support from Ptolemy XIII, the son of his former ally. Tragically, Pompey was assassinated upon his arrival. Cato fled to Cyrenaica in the west, hoping to be joined by Pompey. Meanwhile, Metellus Scipio, Pompey's father-in-law, sought safety in the Roman province of Africa, where he assumed command from the existing Pompeian governor, Publius Attius Verus. Labienus, once a subordinate of Caesar but now a prominent military leader of the Pompeians, was also among their ranks. Before I proceed further, I have a humble request to make. I would greatly appreciate it if you could support me by subscribing to my channel. Thanks! Now let's continue. Upon the Pompeians' arrival in North Africa, King Juba of Numidian Kingdom sided with them and offered intermittent military assistance. On the other hand, Caesar's attention was diverted by his involvement in Egyptian affairs and supporting Cleopatra, which allowed the Pompeians to assemble a sizable army and fleets. After defeating the Egyptians, Caesar returned to Italy to address issues caused by Mark Antony, who was left in command at Rome. With those matters resolved, Caesar then turned his focus towards the Pompeian forces in North Africa. In December 47 BC, Caesar departed Rome and arrived in Lilybaeum, Sicily, around mid-December. He summoned his armies to gather on the island, and within a short period, he had 6 legions assembled. Once the initial 6 legions were ready, Caesar embarked them on transport ships and set sail for Africa approximately 6 days before January's calends. However, his fleet encountered scattering issues during the short voyage, leaving him with only a few galleys at his disposal. This became a significant challenge, dominating the early part of the campaign as Caesar struggled to establish a secure foothold in Africa and gather the rest of his fleet. He turned southward to Ruspina, where he established a new base on January 1, 46 BC. To bring reinforcements, Caesar sent back the empty ships to Sicily, and 10 galleys were dispatched to locate the missing vessels. After only 1 day in Leptis, Caesar returned to Ruspina, where the port was situated 2 miles outside the city. He left a portion of his forces in Ruspina and led 7 of his veteran cohorts to the port, which caused concern among the less experienced troops remaining in the city. Caesar's intention was to use his elite troops to man part of his fleet for a naval expedition to find the missing ships. However, luck was on his side, and the missing fleet returned just as he was preparing to depart. Consequently, Caesar abandoned his planned naval expedition and returned to Ruspina. Being short on supplies, he led 30 cohorts on a foraging expedition, but they encountered a larger Pompeian force commanded by Labienus. Both armies clashed in what later became known as the Battle of Ruspina. Caesar's forces were clearly defeated, forcing him to retreat back to his base. After receiving news that Scipio was approaching with a sizable force, Caesar realized the urgency of fortifying his position. He diligently improved the fortifications of his camp and established defensive lines connecting his camp and the city of Ruspina to the sea, creating a protected zone. To reinforce his cavalry, he landed heavy weapons from his warships, along with many sailors and archers from the fleet. Additionally, workshops were set up to produce more projectiles, such as darts, arrows, sling bullets, and palisades. Orders were sent to Sicily for the supply of timber and food. The Pompeian forces, led by Scipio and Labienus, camped 3 miles from Caesar's position, and their cavalry controlled the area surrounding Caesar's fortified zone, making it challenging for his troops to gather provisions. Caesar's men were forced to resort to meager rations, including seaweed and fresh water for sustenance. As reinforcements started to arrive for Caesar, including the 13th and 14th legions, 800 Gallic cavalry, and 1,000 archers and slingers from Sicily, his morale was bolstered. He gathered all of his legions and advanced from his fortified area along the coast to a plain bordered by a ridge near Scipio's camp. Skirmishes between the cavalry of both sides occurred, and Caesar's forces successfully pushed back the nearest Numidian cavalry. The following day, Caesar arranged his army in battle formation and advanced inland toward Yazida, where Scipio had his supply base. Scipio positioned his army in 4 lines to defend the town, resulting in a standoff as neither commander was willing to risk an attack. Juba returned with 3 legions, 800 regular cavalry, numerous Numidian cavalry, light troops, and 30 elephants, encouraging Scipio to act more aggressively. A series of clashes took place as Caesar slowly moved his fortifications closer to Yazida, preparing to besiege the town. He received further reinforcements as the 9th and 10th legions arrived from Sicily. The standoff persisted for some time, with both armies facing each other in battle formation without launching an actual attack. Caesar was compelled to abandon his attempt to capture Yazida due to a scarcity of supplies. He stationed garrisons in Leptis, Ruspina, and Asilla, before leading his main army on a successful foraging expedition, only to return to his camp afterward. The next engagement took place near the town of Zeta, approximately 10 miles from Scipio's camp and 18 miles from Caesar's. Scipio dispatched 2 legions to forage in the area, and Caesar sought to ambush them, ultimately capturing the town. In response, Scipio mobilized his entire army, forcing Caesar to retreat. During his retreat, Caesar faced an ambush attempt by Labienus near Scipio's camp, causing some difficulties. However, he managed to reach the safety of his own camp. Days later, Caesar advanced towards Scipio's camp, offering battle, but Scipio refused to engage. Caesar captured Sarsura and received reinforcements, boosting his confidence. He offered battle again near Tegea, but Scipio still hesitated to commit fully. To force an engagement, Caesar decided to besiege Thapsus, a coastal city loyal to the Pompeians, located about 15 miles from his main camp at Ruspina. On April 4, 46 BC, at midnight, Caesar moved his army and reached Thapsus. His troops quickly built protective structures to defend against any interference from Scipio. Scipio knew he had to rescue Virgilius, who was commanding the Pompeian garrison in Thapsus, so he pursued Caesar and set up 2 camps about 8 miles away from Thapsus. It seems that there were 2 land routes to Thapsus. One of these routes ran along a narrow strip of land between the sea and salt pits, spanning 1,500 paces. The other route was more direct. Caesar took measures to fortify the spit by constructing a defensive fort, and he stationed most of his troops in the siege lines along the second route. Scipio attempted to advance along the spit but encountered resistance from Caesar's camp. After spending the night near the salt pits, Scipio advanced towards Caesar's fort the following morning and began entrenching himself about 1,500 paces from the sea. Caesar devised a plan to split his forces. He left 2 legions and part of the fleet to continue the siege, while the rest of the fleet was sent to get into the enemy's rear, creating a distraction at the right moment. Caesar himself led the bulk of his army towards Scipio's new camp. Scipio was alerted to Caesar's approach and formed his army in battle formation outside his camp. The elephants were positioned on the wings, and some of his soldiers continued fortifying the camp. In response, Caesar arranged his army into 3 lines. The 10th and 2nd legions were positioned on the right, the 8th and 9th on the left, and 5 legions were placed in the center. 5 cohorts were stationed on each wing, facing the elephants and supported by archers, slingers, and lightly armed troops. Caesar addressed his army, reminding the veterans of their past victories and encouraging the fresh levies to follow their example. Scipio's men were somewhat disorganized. Caesar's troops were eager to engage them, but Caesar was not yet prepared to order an attack. However, some troops on his right took matters into their own hands and forced one of the trumpeters to signal an attack. Unable to halt their men, the centurions watched as the soldiers charged into battle without orders. Caesar realized he could not stop the attack and commanded a general assault. Fortunately for Caesar, his impulsive right wing quickly achieved victory. They managed to drive away Scipio's elephants on the left, causing the Mauritian cavalry to flee. Caesar's right wing then turned and captured Scipio's camp. The surviving enemy soldiers fled towards their previous camp. The garrison of Thapsus attempted to escape from the town, either to support Scipio or to seek safety. They tried to wade past Caesar's siege lines through the gate closest to the sea, but the defenders of the camp repulsed them. Meanwhile, Scipio's defeated troops sought refuge in their camp. However, it appears that their officers abandoned them at this point, and the soldiers were unable to regroup. Caesar's men pursued them relentlessly, and the fleeing soldiers made their way to Juba's camp. To their misfortune, Juba's camp had already fallen to Caesar, and the fugitives fled to a nearby hill. They attempted to surrender, but Caesar's men were still somewhat out of control and massacred them. The situation escalated to the point where they even killed some of their own senior officers, causing many of Caesar's noble officers to seek refuge on his side for safety. Despite Caesar's attempts to persuade his men to accept the surrender of Scipio's forces, he was unsuccessful. After the battle, the defenders in Thapsus refused to surrender. The next day, Caesar held a parade outside the city walls and left 3 legions to continue the siege. He led the rest of his army north towards Utica, the headquarters of the Pompeians. The defeated survivors from Scipio's army fled to Utica, where Cato tried to gather them. When his attempt failed, he arranged ships for their escape and then committed suicide by stabbing himself with a sword. Even though the wound was not immediately fatal, he refused medical help and died shortly afterward. Caesar was upset that he couldn't pardon Cato as he had wanted to, and Cato remained beyond his mercy forever. As Caesar moved north, many Pompeians begged for pardons. Caesar granted pardons to most of them, as he wanted to prove that he wasn't like Sulla, who had used brutal proscriptions after winning the civil war. Only a few of the senior Pompeian leaders managed to escape from Africa. Scipio and some other aristocrats reached their fleet, but they encountered one of Publius Sidius's, an ally of Caesar, fleets. They were defeated, and soon afterwards, Scipio killed himself. Labienus and Pompey's sons found safety in Spain, leading to one final campaign against Caesar at the Battle of Munda, but his victory at Thapsus had already crushed any serious hope of a Pompeian victory. That's all for today. See you in the final episode of the Roman Civil War. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and share, and if you have any suggestions for me, please let me know in the comments section. Thanks for watching. Have a great day ahead.